All right. Good morning. Good morning, all you magnificent melon heads of the world. I hope you guys are well and happy Friday, everybody. Today's September 20th, 2024. And the top story this morning, TMI. No, not too much information. 3 Mile Island. They're starting her back up. At least that's according to the plant's owner, my former employer, as a matter of fact. Constellation Energy announced this morning that they are going to be restarting the 3 Mile Island Unit 1, I should add, Unit 1 at 3 Mile Island reactor that was shuttered in 2019. All right. Before we get into all of the hysterics, which I am sure the anti nuclear activists and all of the imbeciles with the pink hair and the purple and all the daddy issues who have been dominating energy policy in the United States for decades, I'm sure they are dusting off their old talking points this morning about the anti-nuclear hysteria. So let's just get this out of the way. It is Unit 2 at 3 Mile Island that had a partial core meltdown in 1979. Unit 1, the other reactor at the TMI site, that reactor continued to operate for several decades without incidents. Sorry, I'm a little tongue-tied this morning. That is until 2019 when 3 Mile Island Unit 1 was shut down because of economic reasons. So they haven't generated any power at this plant for 5 years, although TMI actually had one of the best safety records in the country, in the world even, of any operating nuclear plant. Now, I've been to this plant. I have toured Unit 2 where the partial meltdown occurred. No fatalities, no even injuries or illnesses have ever been tied to the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant. So I'm sure you guys are going to hear a lot of incredibly ignorant things in the press over the next couple of hours and days about this story. All I can tell you is I have physically been inside this thing before. It is safe. It is fine. I would go there again. There's nothing, there's no safety concerns here beyond, hey, it's a nuclear plant and safety is a very big deal at a nuclear plant. So, this is very good news for the local economy if this deal comes to fruition. That being said, there's a lot of asterisks attached to this. Number one, it's going to cost $1.6 billion. That's at least the initial estimate to restart this unit. They're going to have to rewind their generator. Look, there are thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of valves, pumps, miles and miles of pipe, and this stuff has been dormant since 2019. And they put the plant into what's called, I forget what they call it, the cold shutdown. It was basically mothballed for years. What has happened to the equipment during that time? There's going to be a lot of inspections, a lot of testing. They're going to have to rebuild a lot of this stuff. I'm sure the packing on all these valves is bad. I'm sure they're going to have to rebuild a lot of these pumps. They're going to do a lot of upgrades. Remember, TMI was shut down because power prices were so low in the late 20 teens, largely because of the fracking boom, that the plant just wasn't economical. So what are they telling us here with this story? They're telling us they expect significantly higher power prices in the not too distant future here. In other words, there's a lot of inflation hiding in this story. Now, we just got done talking about the big 50 basis point rate cut from the Federal Reserve last week or this week. So what they're saying here, Constellation, they're going to invest $1.6 billion. I can tell you guys, that is a huge amount of money for an 819 megawatt electric reactor. All right, this is not that big of a power plant, 3 Mile Island. And that's a lot of money. It's about maybe an eighth or a seventh of the cost of an entirely new reactor. The license for 3 Mile Island's nuclear reactor is only good until 2034, and they signed a 20-year power purchase agreement with Microsoft. So what they're telling us here is they're going to have to extend the license of this power plant. I believe Constellation is trying to extend it to 2054. Now, if they actually do that, 3 Mile Island is already in a period of extended license. At least it was until 2019 when it was shut down. They had previously had their license extended by 20 years. So this would require a second license extension for 3 Mile Island in order to meet the terms of this 20-year power agreement. That is unprecedented. That has never happened, at least not to my knowledge, in the nuclear industry. So there's a lot of ifs here. The NRC would have to sign off on this. They would have to grant an unprecedented license extension. $1.6 billion for a little plant like this is not chump change. The data center that it's supposedly going to power hasn't even been built yet. And well, there's a lot to take in here, all right? And I can tell you the incident in 1979 is not a concern in this story. My personal opinion here, if you want me to give my personal opinion, I think Constellation sold at the bottom, and I think they're buying back in at the top. Is my personal opinion. You guys know my position on artificial intelligence. For all of the hoopla about data centers and about AI and chatbots and large language models, there is still not yet a single AI company that is generating a profit. Not ChatGPT, not Stability AI, not Perplexity AI. None of them make money. Right now, they are 100% dependent on the constant inflow of investor capital in order to keep operating. And those data centers are dependent on that investor capital flowing into the startups in order for those startups to be able to afford to rent their GPUs. And so right now, Constellation, they're putting over $1 billion investment into a mothballed nuclear plant to power something that hasn't been built yet, that's going to be rented out to companies that are not profitable and have no discernible plan or path to profitability on the horizon. Constellation is taking a big risk here. And let me just tell you, the Constellation that I used to work for, it was Exelon when I worked for them, they were not a risk-taking company. So Joe Dominguez, the new CEO, he is nothing like his predecessor, Chris Crane, who, by the way, they're going to rename the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant after him. This is a very big business risk that Constellation is taking here. Emphasis on business risk. Again, this is not a safety risk. The idiots with the pink hair are going to be out in full force. Make some popcorn and enjoy it, guys, because there is an entertainment value in some of the stupidity that comes out of their mouths. That being said, on a injury or fatality per megawatt hour basis, nuclear power is by far the safest form of electricity generation known to man. Nothing comes close, not even wind and solar. And that is even when you account for incidents like Chernobyl, like Fukushima, and like 3 Mile Island. Two of those three didn't even result in a single fatality, I might add. So, a lot happening in the nuclear industry today. This is going to be big news. I've been getting calls from former coworkers this morning. It's good to catch up with people talking about this. Great for the local community, great for the people who were put out of work. I went through a nuclear plant closure, myself and my wife. We both lost our jobs on the same day when the Oyster Creek plant closed. We were lucky enough to land on our feet when that happened. So maybe some of these folks are going to get their jobs back. A lot of knowledge has been lost in those 5 years. There's a lot of the people who had worked at that plant for decades who have now retired out of the industry. So they're going to have to hire back a lot of the former younger employees. They're going to have to retrain a lot of new ones. So it's going to be an interesting couple of years at TMI. Also going on this morning, FedEx earnings came out last night, and they were bad. FedEx stock is getting crushed here, down 12% the last time I looked. Package volume falling 3%. Stuff just is not moving. Not a good sign for the economy. And, when people were looking, I was listening to some interviews in the financial press yesterday. A very sour mood took over a lot of these analysts. And, yesterday was just a love fest with, oh my God, the soft landing and Jerome Powell, he's the new Arthur Burns, and the Fed cut rates and the NASDAQ was up 400 points, buy tech stocks, take risk. And then by the end of the day, they saw the FedEx earnings and everybody's like, wow, maybe the economy really is slowing out there. So that kind of takes a chunk out of the soft landing narrative. We got the Bank of Japan, no change to interest rates. That one just hit the tape a few hours ago. The BOJ was widely expected not to move rates. But there was always the outside chance that they could. Remember, the Bank of Japan is raising rates as the Federal Reserve is lowering rates. And right now, the yen carry trade, people borrowing cheap yen in Japan, converting to dollars and buying stocks and other assets in the States, that is propping up a lot of these ridiculously high asset prices. So as those interest rates converge, you get an unwind of that carry trade. Well, that's not happening today because the BOJ did not move. Also, some kind of alarming comments from Kazuo Ueda, the governor of the Bank of Japan, talking about instability overseas, especially in the United States economy. Again, it's not very soft landing. The rosy assessment of the economy, we're not really getting that from the Bank of Japan. We got Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. He's selling even more stock. He sold almost another $1 billion worth of Bank of America stock. He's now sitting on a pile of cash, $278 billion deep. one of the most famous investors in the world, is notoriously selling. He is as bearish as he has ever been in his entire life. Again, soft landing, best economy ever. And we got some more bad news out of China this morning. The youth unemployment rate in China hit 18.8%. That is up sharply from 17.1% a month ago. Remember, guys, the youth unemployment that hit in the mid 20s about 2 years ago. And China said, you know what? We don't like this data point, so we're not going to report it anymore. Then they brought it back, but in a different form. They stripped out all students from the unemployment rate. Shocker, it brought it way down. And youth unemployment has continued to rise ever since they changed the indicator. So the slowdown in China is persisting this morning. We got a lot going on here, everybody. Why don't we shrink my big melon of a head and let's see what's happening in the markets. And this is usually the point where I ask you to hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and come and have your coffee with the melon heads, because we do this every morning. Right now, the S&P 500 is down about 10 points. Not a lot of movement in stocks here this morning. 0.19% lower. A little bit of volatility in the last few minutes here. I'm not sure what happened in the last 15 minutes, resulting in those red candles, but not a big move. The Dow, meanwhile, is down 15 points or 0.04% lower. Again, not a lot happening in stocks this morning. The NASDAQ is 45 points down, about 0.25% lower here. So all three indexes are in the red this morning. We've got a U.S. dollar that is largely unchanged, currently at 100.63 on the DXY or the Dixie. That's up 1 basis point this morning. So not a lot happening in the Forex market. Now, let's talk about Forex for just a second, because we did mention this one in the monologue. Bank of Japan leaves rates unchanged and Ueda signals pause. The Bank of Japan left rates unchanged on Friday in line with market expectations and against the backdrop of a yen rally that is starting to cause some concern. It kept the uncollateralized overnight call rate steady at 0.25% following a two-day meeting of its policy board. According to polls ahead of the decision, analysts were in agreement that the BOJ would choose not to make any rate adjustments. Markets fluctuated wildly immediately after the last interest rate hike in July. And looking at the movements of the dollar-yen rate, it remains somewhat volatile. So I think this may not be the right time to raise interest rates, said Shotaro Kugo, a senior economist at Daiwa Institute of Research. You guys may recall the last time the Japanese hiked interest rates, it resulted in that massive sell-off on August 5th. Now, I had this paragraph highlighted and I lost it. Here we go. It was this comment here that kind of caught my attention here. Ueda, talking about BOJ Governor Kazuo Ueda, he signaled that the BOJ is not in a hurry to raise interest rates. And this comment that he made, due to uncertainty about the future of overseas economies, particularly the United States, we believe the financial markets are still unstable, Ueda said at the news conference. Now, typically these central bankers, maybe there's a little bit getting lost in translation here, but to hear them talk about how we believe financial markets are still unstable, that's a noted departure from the all is well, nothing to see here, move along kind of rhetoric we typically get from these guys. So, while our central bankers are telling us everything is strong and resilient and the labor market remains strong and we stuck the soft landing and I'm so good at my job, yay me, Kazuo Ueda is saying overseas economies, particularly the United States, we believe financial markets are unstable. So not entirely stable, this asteroid is. Chewie, take the professor in the back and plug him into the hyperdrive. I never miss an opportunity, to quote Star Wars. By the way, the Japanese yen, it weakened again overnight here, 143.57. That's up about a little more than 0.5%. Now, guys, we have had for about the last 5 days here a little bit of a weakening in the yen. This chart, USD JPY, this is the number of yen it takes to make $1. As that has been moving up over the last few days, the yen has been weakening. But also keep in mind, in context, look at what it has done since that July jobs report and then the mayhem that we got on August 5th, that big one right there when the stock market sold off like crazy. So the yen has been strengthening significantly. We've had a little bit of a correction in that. And I would add we're kind of in line with those recent highs, that trend of declining highs. I think I've drawn enough squiggles on the chart for the yen. Let's look at the bond market, and we've got a mixed bag in the bond market this morning. The 30-year Treasury, 4.065%. That's down about 1 basis point. The 10-year is higher again this morning, 3.737. The 10-year yield has gone up 3 days in a row since the Fed has lowered interest rates. That's just a reminder, guys. The Fed only controls that overnight rate. They do not control the long end of the yield curve and those longer durations. That is set by supply and demand in the bond market. And those interest rates have been moving higher. The 2-year, meanwhile, 3.612, up about 1 point. And even the 1 month, look at that, up 7 basis points. Is that accurate? Wow, the 1 month making a big move here, 4.763. So some unusual activity in the bond market here this morning. And commodities, we got some big green numbers among precious metals, right? Another inflationary story here. Look at spot gold, $2,611. It was as high as 2,619 this morning, a new all-time high for gold, up another $24 this morning, or about 1% higher. Gold is telling us inflation is coming back, guys. It's making new all-time highs on the regular. So, while they tell us, hey, we've defeated inflation and everything is great, the soft landing, and I'm so good at my job, gold says otherwise. People don't usually pile into gold during good times. Silver is saying the same thing here, up 40 cents this morning for spot silver, or 1.3% higher, trading at $31.19. I like the shiny. We've got copper is up a fraction of 1% here. Platinum and palladium are both down a little bit. Crude oil is also down 0.5% here, although still above $70 a barrel. Oil has had a little bit of a rally in the last couple of weeks here, $70.78 for November WTI futures. And let's look over at Bitcoin. Bitcoin was higher by a few $100 this morning. It's given away some of that now. This is as priced on Coinbase, trading at $62,967, essentially unchanged at this point. Bitcoin has had a good couple of days since the Fed cut rates. And actually, Bitcoin has done nothing but rally pretty much since that low that we saw. Well, that was in mid-September. This is what I was referring to. Here's that mayhem on August 5th caused by the Japanese instability. Bitcoin has rallied off of those lows. All right, now let's talk about 3 Mile Island again here. Here's the article in Bloomberg. Microsoft's AI power needs prompt revival of 3 Mile Island nuclear plant. Constellation is set to invest $1.6 billion to restart the dormant reactor as data center power demand surges. The owner of the shuttered 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in Pennsylvania will invest $1.6 billion to revive it, agreeing to sell all of the output to Microsoft Corp as the tech titan seeks carbon-free electricity for data centers to power the artificial intelligence boom. Constellation Energy, the biggest U.S. operator of reactors, expects 3 Mile Island to go back into service in 2028. That's a pretty ambitious target, by the way. That's according to a statement on Friday. While one of the site's 2 units permanently closed almost half a century ago after the worst nuclear accident the worst U.S. nuclear accident, Constellation is planning to reopen the other reactor, which shut in 2019 because it couldn't compete economically. Now, there was a couple of comments I had down here. While the 3 Mile Island reactor was mothballed in 2019, Dominguez said the equipment is still in good shape. Still, restarting it will require significant investments in the main transformers, turbines, and cooling systems. I would add those main transformers, guys. Those things are the size of a house. There's only 1 or 2 places in the world where you can get one of those made. So that's going to be a big deal, getting those done. The company will have to restaff the facility and must seek approval from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. That NRC approval, that is a huge question mark on this deal. I can tell you guys that Greenpeace and the League of Women Voters and everybody, all of those nut job radical organizations, they are dusting off the lawsuits and the lawyers right now. They're going to do everything they can to slow this down and make this more expensive. So again, you're going to hear a lot of nonsense in the near future around this story. But this is not a safety concern, to be honest with you. This is an economic question. Can this plant be viable with the demand from this data center? Constellation will also seek to extend its operating license through 2054 and is planning to rename the facility the Crane Clean Energy Center after the late Chris Crane, former CEO of Exelon Corp, which spun out its generation unit to become Constellation in 2022. It's kind of interesting to rename the 3 Mile Island site after the CEO who sealed the fate of that site by deciding to shut it down back in 2019. That's kind of interesting. One of the biggest hurdles will be connecting the plant to the power grid operated by PJM Interconnection LLC, which has a lengthy queue If PJM can move fast enough, Dominguez said the facility could potentially be ready to supply power as early as 2027. I'm so glad we're reversing a terrible mistake that shouldn't have happened. That's why we're naming the plant after the guy who made that mistake. It will be a lot more difficult to achieve the energy transition if we only want to use wind and solar and storage. I agree with that last statement. The energy transition, it's not happening on wind and solar alone. This is pretty unusual, guys. There's nowhere in the country where we have a nuclear plant that powers one thing. This would be a first of its kind to restart a nuclear facility, to put all the money into the capital improvements that you need to do to get it restarting for the sole purpose of powering a data center. That's a very risky decision, and it's a very, again, it just shows how this company has changed since I left the company, because the Exelon that used to own Constellation, they spun off, would never make a decision like this. This is putting a lot of eggs in one basket, because if that data center somehow becomes unprofitable, well, then this power plant is being restarted just for the sole purpose of powering that data center. And again, guys, I hate to keep beating on this one drum, but all of the data center customers, all of the companies that actually rent these GPUs, none of them are profitable yet. It's all private equity and investor cash that's paying for this AI boom. Nobody has made a profit. Not even OpenAI has made a profit. They're actually out there trying to raise capital at $150 billion valuation right now because they're not profitable and because they're going to be bankrupt inside of a year if they don't. And so, what Constellation is doing here is they're saying we're betting $1.5 billion that AI is going to become profitable sometime between now and 2027. That's a pretty big if. The world is just going around like this is already decided and set in stone. I'm not so sure that is necessarily true. And also what they're saying here is they're saying AI is going to drive power prices sharply higher in the future. So this is important, guys, because of the inflation story. Higher electricity means higher prices for everything. So while we're all talking about how great ChatGPT is, and oh yeah, it's, which by the way, the hallucinations in AI are hilarious, glue your pizzas together and all that kind of stuff. That's going to drive electricity prices higher, which is going to drive the price of everything higher. It's also something that's worth talking about here. The fact that Constellation is putting the money into this plant, they are betting on higher energy prices in the future here. Another inflationary story. All right, let's shift gears a little bit to FedEx here. FedEx slumps as lowered outlook offers a warning sign for the economy. The shipping giant cut top end at year end. Let me start that over. The shipping giant cut top end of full year earnings forecast. And I'm sure everything is fine in the economy, guys. And that's why the company that ships packages is selling off 12% today, and why nobody's shipping any packages, because the economy is so strong and everything is so good, right? FedEx Corp warned its business would slow in the year ahead and reported a worse than expected quarterly profit, in an ominous sign about the direction of the U.S. company in the U.S. economy. The parcel giant was hurt by a pullback on priority services as customers traded down to cheaper shipping options in what Chief Executive Officer Raj Subramanian called a challenging quarter. A broad effort to slash costs, i.e. cut people, gained traction, but only partially blunted those headwinds, the Memphis-based company said late Thursday. And that's kind of a tell right there. That's telling us there's probably more layoffs coming at FedEx when they talk about how, yeah, it was a challenging quarter. We cut costs, meaning we fired people, and that only partially blunted those headwinds, means we're probably going to have to trim headcount further, although no layoffs have actually been announced yet. FedEx shares slid up to 14% before regular trading on Friday in New York. Rival UPS also fell 2.6%. FedEx saw increasingly price-sensitive customers downgrading to slower and cheaper shipping options during the latest quarter, a trend that also hit UPS earlier this year. U.S. domestic shipping volumes fell 3% at FedEx Express segment due to weaker business-to-business demand, Chief Customer Officer Bree Carrera said on the company's earnings call. Take a look at FedEx stock here, guys. Down almost 13% ahead of the opening bell this morning, trading at $261.45. That's down almost $39 here. So FedEx getting clobbered here. Again, guys, the whole the AI boom, the AI economy, and big tech stocks are doing so well, and it's going to change the world. While all that's going on, Packages aren't moving. Stuff isn't moving. People aren't shipping things. So everybody's got their eyes over the horizon on the future. Nobody is watching what's going on right now. What's going on right now is stuff isn't selling because people ran out of money. Their savings is gone because of inflation. Their wages have not risen as fast as their cost of living. And so they're ordering less stuff, and they're sure as hell not paying up for premium express, whatever, platinum plus shipping. So FedEx taking a dive here, down 13%. And something else that is going on right now is one of the most famous investors in the world is selling stocks hand over fist. Warren Buffett's remaining $34 billion Bank of America stake is now pure profit. That's a funny way of saying Warren Buffett is still dumping Bank of America stock at breakneck pace. Berkshire Hathaway has reaped more than it spent on the investment. That includes proceeds from stock sales and years of dividends. Look, this was a great deal for Buffett. I mean, he's now pulled out his cost basis, so he's got $34 billion of profit. It was a fantastic trade for Buffett, but he is selling at a pretty wild pace here. Warren Buffett's continued disposal of Bank of America Corp shares have now covered the billionaire's investment costs, leaving him with more than $34 billion stake. That's pure profit. In a round of transactions disclosed in a filing on Thursday, Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway sold $896 million of the stock this week. That means total proceeds from share disposals since mid-July and dividends earned since 2011 have surpassed the $14.6 billion mark. The conglomerate has spent to build its stake in the second largest U.S. bank. So Warren Buffett is now holding some $278 billion of cash. And the fact that he's sitting on cash and he's not buying anything with that cash tells me that he thinks anything he might buy with that money is going to be cheaper at some time in the future. And I would also point out that we're not going to get many more stories like this because Berkshire Hathaway's ownership in the bank could soon slide below the 10% regulatory threshold that requires it to disclose transactions within a few days. Once Buffett controls less than that, he may wait weeks to reveal these transactions, typically offering only quarterly snapshots. So Bank of America stock kind of shrugging this one off. The opening bell just rang, $40.70 here. It's down a couple of pennies, 20 cents lower, or about a half of 1%. Bank of America pretty much shrugging this one off. Buffett has been selling for several weeks, so it's not really big news, but he is still selling, and he's got plenty more to sell. He's still sitting on $34 billion. He's only sold about a third of his position here. And shifting gears again, let's head over to China here. China's youth jobless rate rises this year to this year's high amid a slowdown. Youth unemployment rate climbs for 2 months in a row, and the figure is more than 3 times the overall jobless rate. It's not a good time to be a recent college grad in China here. China's youth unemployment rate rose for the second straight month to its highest level this year as the labor market faces a challenging outlook due to a weakening economy. The jobless rate among people aged 16 to 24 rose to 18.8% in August, according to data released on Friday by the National Bureau of Statistics. That's an increase from 17.1% in July and is 3.5 times higher than the overall unemployment rate. The August figure is also the highest since Beijing changed the youth unemployment methodology in January to exclude students, saying it more accurately reflects the size of the workforce. Just a reminder, guys, back in last summer, the youth unemployment rate in China was over 21%. I believe it peaked at 21.8%. And then China just said, you know what, we're not going to report this anymore. It's too big of a problem. It makes it look bad. And we are a Chinese Communist Party. We just love to oppress civil rights. People are playthings to be moved about like pawns on a chessboard. And so they cracked down on the information. They stopped reporting it. They made it faux pas to even talk about unemployment. Then they brought back the data point earlier this year using a new methodology that made the picture look better. Instantly, youth unemployment dropped dramatically. Well, it's back up now to 18.8%. So even without counting students, we're almost back to where we were before China just ditched the whole indicator. So once again, where are my bottom callers in China? It seems like almost every day somebody is trying to call a bottom in China, even though things just keep getting worse. Look, China, they built entire cities, empty cities. That has not changed. It doesn't change just because of a couple of tweaks to your monetary policy or a couple of moves in interest rates. When you've got entire cities that have been built, and you've got, in some cities, the average cost of a modest apartment is something like 35 to 40 times the median salary. That is a bubble within a bubble within a bubble. And there's just no way to slowly and carefully unwind that. So, on top of that, China's got a demographic collapse because they forgot how to make babies in that country. The birth rate in China has been below the replacement rate for decades. China's population is actually falling now. That is not a good sign for the housing market. And I think we're going to keep seeing stories like this for the foreseeable future. And I just want to say thank you very much to, hey, there's my buddy Travis, my fellow shark fisherman, real estate mindset. What's going on, brother? He's got a picture of there's the shark there. Travis and I caught a couple of bull sharks on the beach in Houston. Well, sorry. Oh, did I just give it away, Travis? Did I just disclose your secret spot? Travis and I caught a couple of bull sharks. It was a good time, brother. Thank you so much for taking us out. Had a blast. I got some pictures and video of that, but we may be sharing with you guys in the future. Thanks again for the super chat, brother. And Mighty Mike 53 says, TGIF, thanks, Jack. 2 10-year buckle up, talking about the inversion in the yield curve there. Have a great weekend. Right back at you, brother. We still got that 10-year is rising. Long-term interest rates are heading higher. Remember, guys, that is set based on supply and demand dynamics in the bond market, not the Fed. The Fed can influence it with their own transactions, but they don't set it directly. And it's done nothing but go up since they lowered rates. Keep an eye on that 10-year. That's interesting. Thanks again, Mighty Mike. And thank you to Uncle Fedster. Says, happy Friday, Jack. Let's hope the Pepsi syndrome doesn't happen after 3 Mile Island fires back up. The Pepsi syndrome. I'm not familiar with that one, Uncle Fedster. Forgive me while I do a quick Google on Pepsi syndrome. I've never heard of that. Are we talking, is that like a China syndrome reference? Or is this, oh, okay, the SNL skit. All right, the SNL. Yeah, look, the China syndrome movie, I've seen that. That was a silly movie. Look, we're going to have some pretty nutty things come out of these people's mouths, guys. One of my first experiences in nuclear power, my first week on the job, some of my coworkers said, hey, we're going to the library up in Toms River where this meeting was being held. And it was a panel of experts on nuclear power. That panel of experts was Alec Baldwin, the actor, Christy Brinkley, the washed-up supermodel, and this guy named Richard Webster, who is a lawyer who specializes in junk science. This panel of experts on nuclear power, an actor, a model, and a lawyer, in other words, 3 bullshit artists, and it was just nothing about but anti-nuclear hysteria. And the crowd was just gobbling it up. It is so easy to just scare people about, oh my God, your teeth are going to fall out and we're all going to be poisoned by radiation. These are people who had been living next to a nuclear plant for decades. They were all in perfect freaking health, and they were all being convinced by Alec Baldwin that this nuclear plant was going to kill them. That was my first introduction to anti-nuclear hysterics. And, well, there is no limit to the stupid crap that will come out of their mouths, and I am sure they're going to be out in full force today. And we'll have some fun with them when it comes out. Thank you very much, Uncle Fedster, sir, for supporting the channel. And thank you to Kevin DeBella for being a melonhead for 5 months. He says, I need my Zerpenberg t-shirt, please. Merchandising. Zerpenberg, when oppressing the masses, accept no substitutes. That t-shirt is in the works. Don't worry, Kevin DeBella. We'll have that sooner or later. Thanks again for being a melonhead, sir. And thank you, Kevin DeBella, says a guest in Bloomberg yesterday literally laughed at the host for suggesting that gold prices at all-time highs could mean inflation isn't over. Well, wasn't there people, what was it, in like 2003 when gold was like $400 or $500 an ounce, and they said, oh, it was a pet rock and it's obsolete and nobody will ever buy it again? Yeah, and what's it now, $2,600? Look, gold making new all-time highs on a seemingly weekly basis. That is not a ringing endorsement of the current monetary policy at the Federal Reserve. And remember, guys, the last time we saw gold rallying on a slow, steady basis was in the spring and the summer of 2020, when the Federal Reserve was telling everybody inflation would be transitory. Don't worry, inflation is low. It's below our target. Yeah, we think there might be some inflation, and it's mostly because of what's happening at ports and the supply disruptions, and it's all going to be better. Inflation will be transitory. And then gold went from what, 1,500 an ounce? No, it was 1,300 an ounce to about 2,000 an ounce in a span of a couple of months. So, when these talking heads in Bloomberg and CNBC start laughing at gold at all-time highs, probably a pretty good signal to buy a little bit of gold. Look, I like the shiny. I don't buy gold to get rich. I don't buy gold for capital appreciation. I buy gold as an insurance policy to protect my dollars from becoming worthless. So I think that's probably that's my approach to gold. Thank you very much, Kevin DeBella, sir. I appreciate the super chat and the support of the channel. And thank you to Prashant Mandari. I hope I'm saying that right, Prashant. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate the generosity, sir. Love your daily show and keep up the great work. Thank you very much. And not as funny as Jon Stewart. I try. But yeah, it is my daily show, not the daily show. And thank you so much for watching and for supporting it, sir. You are a gentleman and a scholar. I'm glad you're enjoying it very much. And thank you to MVD Reports, who says NVIDIA going to be opening their own plant now at all-time highs. You know, NVIDIA is not opening their own plant, but I can tell you there is a company called Helion Energy that is out there that Sam Altman of OpenAI ChatGPT fame is investing in right now. And he says this Helion company, they say they are going to have a fully operational, commercially operating fusion reactor by 2027, and they have already sold the power to Microsoft. I'm not making that up. They are, though, because there is not even a operating prototype of a fusion reactor anywhere on Earth capable of generating electricity. We're only very briefly able to make them net thermally energy positive, which means we can get them to make a little bit more heat than the energy we put into them. But we can't sustain it, and we certainly can't generate electricity off of it yet. And yet this Helion Energy company is already cutting power deals for fusion reactors that right now are just fantasies, sketches on the back of a napkin. When I heard that story, that made me want to short anything Sam Altman had ever touched, because that is just straight up BS, guys. The running joke in the nuclear industry is that fusion energy has been 50 years away for the last 50 years. And much like the TMI deal, which again, I'm skeptical of the TMI. I don't doubt that they're going to put the money in and try to restart it. I doubt the economics of it. We would need significantly higher electricity prices to make TMI economically viable at this point. And if the energy prices do rise that much, that means the data centers are going to be less economically viable because they're having to pay higher energy prices. And those data centers right now, the only reason they're profitable is because private equity and venture capital keeps handing billions of dollars to the companies that are using them, companies that don't make money. Most of them don't even have a marketable product yet. So there's a lot of stars that need to align in order for this deal with Constellation and TMI to make money. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying it's improbable at this point. And, well, I wish them luck. I wish my former coworkers at TMI luck. I hope they're able to get that thing up and running again. It broke my heart to see a nuclear reactor shut down in 2019. I've been through that myself. I think there's plenty of good reasons to start that reactor up again without the data center. But I don't think the data center necessarily makes it a good decision. But thank you, MVD Reports. And thank you very much to Steve Boyd. It says government and Fed inflation is under control. Then why is gold increasing? That's an excellent question, Steve. Why is it? Because central banks are buying gold. Why are central banks buying gold? Crickets. Maybe central banks are buying gold because they know if they reprice gold on their own balance sheets, then they can instantly make themselves solvent, because right now central banks around the world are bleeding cash, hitting their governments with the bill for it. Most notably in the UK, the Bank of England has been bleeding out billions of pounds. And when a central bank loses money, that goes as a negative line item in the budgets of the governments. So how do you fix that? Well, you buy gold, and then you say, we changed our mind. The gold is now worth more money. And then, of course, central banks can print and manipulate markets enough to make that gold price rise. Possible a repricing of gold on the horizon, Steve Waitis, and maybe that's why private investors are buying so much of it. Thank you, sir, for the super chat. And thank you, Joey Sox, for gifting 5 Nobody Special Finance memberships. Welcome to you, 5 new melon heads. Be sure and say thank you to Joey Sox if you got one of those memberships in the comments down below. Thank you so much, Joey, for supporting the channel, sir. You too are a gentleman and a scholar and a melon head, and I'm digging the Paulie Walnuts avatar there. And last but certainly not least, True Rebel Productions, thank you very much, who says, you are best, Mr. Jerome Powell. Mr. Jerome Powell is the best, really? Where is he? Let's bring Jerome up here. Jerome would just to say, thank you very much, True Rebel Productions. I appreciate your kind words. My colleagues and I are acutely aware of how much pain inflation has caused you, and that's why we are bringing interest rates down at an alarming rate right now so that we can rip off you and your family and debase your wages even more because the banks and private investors who yank on my puppet strings want me to do so. Well, thank you very much, Chair Powell, for that rare moment of honesty. I appreciate that very much. Thank you, True Rebel, for supporting the channel with your super chat, sir. I appreciate that very much. And thank you to all of you for watching this morning. I appreciate that very much. I'm excited to see a nuclear plant starting up again. I'm skeptical about the reason why, but I wish them luck with it. And just a reminder, guys, it is Friday afternoon, so I'll be back at 3:15 p.m. Eastern time for my weekly wrap-up live stream. And we will be back in the studio on Monday, back at the home base. And between now and then, I hope you guys have an awesome Friday. Thank you very much, everybody, for the generosity in the super chats. Thank you to my magnanimous Melonhead members on Patreon and YouTube. Links down below, should you feel so inclined. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Love you guys. Everybody, till next time, live small and dream big.